Yeah, so today we talk about family mottos. I mostly had a kind of a hard time prepping this because I want to talk about so much. And so I don't know if the talk was a little bit all over the place, but please give me feedback. Um, Family mottos. They're your family's spoken and unspoken beliefs and assumptions about things. Everything from your attitudes towards church, your spending habits, your work habits, how you interact with people, your attitudes towards your finances, conflict resolution. It could be about anything. So we all learn our attitudes and beliefs from somewhere, right? And first and foremost from our family, because that's who we spend most of our time with in our formative years. Um, Not only by the things they say, but probably even more so by the things they model to you, by the things they do. Um, and because these beliefs are so instilled in us when we were like so young, we often don't think to question them. Like they're so ingrained that they become kind of like unconscious assumptions, and we just kind of assume they're true and work off that. But there also lies a difficulty in dealing with them. The fact that they are either often unconscious beliefs or they're so fundamental that we just assume it's right and we don't really think to question them. But like it's really important to question them and examine them because the family mottos can be good or bad, right? So it is important to trace, face, and replace them, which Stan taught us how to do last week. So if you need a refresher, please listen to his talk on our Spur Life channel. Yeah.
Okay, so swag.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, turn on your notifications. So good family mottos can encourage you during hardship. They can serve you to achieve your goals. They can comfort you when you need comfort. And good family mottos are all based on the truth. That's the reason why they comfort you and help you is because they are true. You can think of them as like familial truth coaches, right? Truth coaches on a family level that your whole family believes. And an example of a good family motto for my family is don't help others for what you can get in return. Like you don't even think about it. Just help them to help them. Because that was like really modeled to me growing up. Like my parents would often have people staying over at our house that I would walk home. I'm like, oh, why is there a stranger in the house? And it's just like someone my mom took in for 2 weeks because she couldn't find a house or something like that. Or like there'd be someone over during some sort of festival and they bring gifts and I'm like, who's that? And my mom's, oh, just some lady I lent a bunch of money to start a business because she couldn't find a job. But shit, they would do things like that all the time. So that's a good family motto, right? In contrast, though, a bad family mottos, they're lies, they're untrue, they're misbeliefs. And they can not only hinder you, if left unexamined and uncorrected, they can be passed down from one generation to the next and that's how they become generational curses because you don't deal with them, right? So do you want your children and grandchildren to be oppressed by the same lies that have been oppressing you? That's a question to consider. And if not, then we need to examine our family mottos. And the way you do that is simply by asking, is it true? Is this family motto true? It's a simple question, but not necessarily easy to deal with, right? It's not necessarily easy to answer. And it can be extremely hard dealing with family mottos. Sometimes it means questioning your parents, your grandparents, questioning things you have believed to be true your whole life, even things that have been perceived as true for generations in your family. And that actually, there's such thing as a cultural motto too, right? So that's even like it more deeply ingrained than just a family motto. But you deal with it the same way. It can feel like you're doing the wrong thing when you're confronting these things. It feels like you're betraying your family. It can feel like you're rocking the boat, causing a lot of unnecessary conflict. It can be tempting to ask if it's all worth it and just like relent and just go with the flow and it's just to keep the peace, But the truth is, peace at any price will just keep costing you more and more. Right? That's one of Dave Riddell's truth coaches, and it's so true. So is it worth it dealing with it, despite all the difficulty? And the answer is an emphatic yes. It's always worth it to align yourself with the truth, even if in the short term it feels wrong. We have to remember that it can feel wrong, but it's not wrong. Remember, our feelings are real, but they're not always true or accurate, right? So if you are going down the wrong path, and the first step to correcting that is to actually go backwards that can feel like you're going the wrong way. Acknowledge your feeling. They can be a helpful suggestion, but don't trust them as an 100% accurate guide. That they are not. And I like to share some examples of my family's broken mottos growing up, where my relationship with my parents was because of them, and where it is now, and some of the things I learned and what I would do differently if I could navigate it again. And hopefully it will be helpful for you if when you confront yours. So the example I had is like the family motto we had growing up was, leisure is a waste of time. You should always be doing something productive. What that looked like growing up was that I was not allowed to rest. I always had to be either working or studying or practicing an instrument or art or reading a book. If I was seen doing something else, like if I was just watching TV or playing games on my computer, my mum would always have something to say. If she was in a okay mood, it would be like just a nag. It would be like, oh, stop wasting your time. There's a point. Let's go read a book or something. But if she was in a bad mood, she would get angry and yell at me, right? So every year on my birthday, my parents would ask me what I wanted. And for a bit of context, like my birthday was always in the school holidays. And I always had to work and help them out since I was very young because I didn't have to go to school, right? So they would always ask me, what do you want for your birthday? And every year I would say, I want a day off. I just don't want to go to work. I just want a day where I can do anything I want without being nagged. And then my mum would always say, every single year without fail, oh, okay, since you don't want to work, why don't you go do chores and study instead? And then I would go mental, right? I would just go explode. I would explode with anger and frustration, and every year I would end up in tears out of pure frustration. And then because of my tantrum, I get another bollocking about how ungrateful and crazy I was. It basically happened every year I can remember. And so the last time I celebrated my birthday was when I was 10 years old. Because after that, every year on my birthday, I would feel like crap. But Jess and I are working to correct that now. We're fighting that misbelief. So this year on my 30th birthday, we went out to a restaurant and had a dinner, and it was tough. It wasn't easy for me to do, but we did it. It's still a struggle, but usually even now on my birthday, I'll be like extra irritable. I get grumpy and angry over the smallest things, right? But it's a process. But do you see how that one family motto really affected my family? It created a chasm between me and my parents that really affected our ability to form intimate connections with each other. And it set the tone for our relationship to be purely transactional for a very long time. It was only about what can you do? What work can you do? And unless we're talking about work, we just wouldn't talk to each other. So through the years, that chasm grew between me and my parents, and so did the unaddressed family motto. It can evolve because it wasn't corrected. And it evolved from rest is a waste of time to, so that was like what my parents believe, rest is a waste of time. By the time it got to me, it evolved to rest is not only a waste of time, rest is weakness. Rest is only for the weak. Only weak people need rest. But guess what? Everyone gets tired. So I got stuck in this cycle. The more I worked, the more tired I got. The more I needed rest, the weaker I felt. Therefore, the more I worked to stop feeling weak. So that's a vicious cycle, right? And soon enough, I stopped resting altogether. And the only time I would really stop is when I crashed out. And of course, this is not healthy, because the truth is, rest is not only okay, it's actually needed by everyone. In fact, rest is godly and holy because even God rested, right? Anyway, I lived like that for like 15 years until I was about 26, 27 years old, and I completely burnt out. Couldn't do anything more. And then I came home and I told my parents that I was heavily, heavily depressed and I needed a break from everything. Like, I'm not just saying from study or work, like no study, no work, no house chores, no nothing. I need a break. And because of the family motto we all believed in, that did not go down well at all. My parents' first response to me telling them that I was like super depressed and almost quite suicidal since I was 15 was like, they were like, what? Where's this coming from? Why are you so weak? You have to admit that your own weakness contributed to this. And these are like, exact quotes of what my mom said to me. I would overhear them talking about me behind my back in their own room. They didn't know I could hear them. They would say things like, "Oh, he's just so lazy. He's not putting any effort into picking himself back up. He's not even trying." And so for about a year, me and my mom were like a spark and gasoline. The slightest contact and we would blow up. But literally could not hold a normal conversation at all for more than 3 sentences. I would accuse her of all the things she said and did to me and blah, blah, blah. And then she would get defensive and gaslight me because she didn't want to feel guilty. I was like, I didn't do that. I didn't say that. That's not what I meant, blah, blah, blah. And then she'd start yelling and then I would yell back, and not helpful for anyone. And there were countless times where I would storm out of my house, drive somewhere and literally just break down crying. And sometimes I'd call Jess. And sometimes my mum would call Jess too. It was quite a hard time to navigate, but now looking back, all their opinions on depression, on rest, on weakness, on everything were all tainted by that family motto. That rest is a waste of time, or it shouldn't be done. You should always be doing something productive. And it's not that they were purposely abusive to me. They lived by that family motto too. They were exhausted and tired, But if we didn't have that false family motto, perhaps my parents and I could have actually gotten some healthy rest from time to time, and not had the misunderstandings between us, and our relationship would not have been that bad for so long. But you live and learn, right? Anyway, that feels like it was a long time ago, because now my relationship with my parents is actually really great. God has completely transformed it, flipped it upside down. We can talk about anything. I can give them suggestions and call them out when I think they're wrong very directly, and they can do the same for me, right? So we have a great relationship now. But so how did we get there from where we were? How did we get from I can say, "Hey, I don't think that's right," and we can talk about it, to "Hello, good morning," and then poof. How did that happen? I prayed to God to fix my crazy parents in Jesus' name, and it was done. Yeah, that's the secret. Everyone, go home. Thanks for listening. And that's how it works. Yeah. So if you have struggles and you prayed about it and it's not changed, you need to pray more, right? No, of course not. It was a long, hard, faith-stretching process. God loves us too much to do what we ought to do for ourselves, for us, because then you don't grow. Right, you become a spoiled child. Because if we see someone who's 20 and they still don't know how to do their own laundry because their mother did it for them their whole life, that's not love. You've literally ruined the child. And God does not want to do that to us. So he wants us to do things that we ought to do for ourselves. Even if we suck at it in the beginning, we have to learn and try, right? And that's what he wants. It's the heart of a father, not a rescuer. But he is there every step of the way, helping us. So even though we do the thing, he's helping us. We're not doing it alone, right? And here are a few points that I have concluded that I think made a difference in our relationship and what I would do differently now. Number 1, be deeply rooted in the truth. You have to make sure you're on the right side before you commit to the battle, right? Otherwise, you're fighting for the wrong side. And the more effort you put into it, the farther away you are from where you're going, right? And so how do you know if something is true or false? Well, number 1, what does God say about it? Because if God says something is true, then it's true. And all other opinions to the contrary are wrong, okay? That's just simply how it works. Because God is the truth, right? And to know that, what God thinks, we need to read our Bible, number 1. And pray, right? You actually have to form an intimate connection with God before you know what he thinks about things, right? There's really no substitute to that. And secondly, what do the others around you say about it? If you have a complaint against your parents or a family motto you think is wrong, what if it's right though? What if you're the one who's in the wrong? So it's you have to make sure it's right. So a really good way to tell is to ask people around you, the people who care about you, especially those who you trust, who are older and wiser than you. Lay out your situation to them, vulnerably, and ask for their advice. We all have blind spots. And that's why it's important to have a community around you whom you can seek counsel from and be vulnerable and accountable to, and tell them the situation and examine your blind spots, right? Number 3, does what you believe set you free, or does it oppress you? That's a good litmus test, I think, and one we learn from Living Wisdom as well. Because the truth always sets free and empowers. So if you feel like you're empowered, you're probably believing the truth. And if you're obligated, trapped, like you have no choice, then you probably don't believe the truth yet. And that's another way you can tell. But being rooted in the truth will empower you to face the lies. For example, if my parents said to me now what they said to me years ago, that I'm lazy and weak, instead of going crazy like I did before, and punching holes in the wall, and stabbing the mattress with knives, and cracking a lot of doors with my fists, I would just say to them, no, I'm not. In that exact tone, right? And get on with my day. And I'm able to do that because I'm rooted in the truth, right? I'm no longer getting my opinion of myself from them, but from the truth, right? And it's no different to if someone said I had blonde hair. Like, I don't, obviously, but that statement wouldn't make me angry, right? And they're both like, you're weak and you have blonde hair. They're both just false statements, but why do some false statements get us so worked up? It's worth examining, right? Like, it's actually all about inside us. So the solution isn't to tell the other person, hey, I'm not weak, don't say that. It's actually ask yourself, why did I get triggered by that,
So good.
And if after examining the statement that someone says, and you come to the hard conclusion that actually what they're saying is right, like if I was lazy and my parents call me lazy, they don't get angry either. Thank them for caring enough for you to point that out at the risk of you blowing up, right? Treasure that relationship because it's a good one. And being rooted in the truth is what allows you to have conversations in a calm yet firm manner. Just like, if they call me weak, I'll be like, no, I'm not. And it will help you make so much progress. There will be more chances to actually communicate because the conversation will not turn into a shouting match every 3 sentences, right? And communication is like a back and forth. It needs to have a give and take. That's communication. There can be no communication if you're both just outputting, if you're not actually taking in what other people are saying. If you're both just attacking each other and yelling at each other, that's not communication. And so after I started getting more and more deeply rooted in the truth, after a while, even if my mum did start yelling and getting really defensive when I would talk to her, I was able to, instead of just yelling back or getting really worked up, I was able to just really calmly ask her, why are you yelling? What was it I said that made you react that way? And then because the way I reacted, it would shut her up and calm her down. Because instead of when you start yelling at each other, you build on each other's anger, right? They get more angry the more you get angry, and it just escalates. But when you're actually able to really calmly talk to them, it diffuses it. And then she was able to calm down, and we could actually talk about what she reacted to and communicate about exactly what she thought I was saying versus what I actually said, and talk about what her beliefs and really converse on a deeper level, right? And the progress just grew exponentially from there. So we started leaving conversations feeling like we both put down a very, very heavy load after each one that we had been carrying for a long time. It started to feel really cathartic after every conversation. We got really connected and got to know each other better. It wasn't just complaining, and so we both, I think, we both started to actually look forward to those conversations. So being rooted in the truth is actually what gives you the courage to have these hard conversations, right? Because like I said, it can feel scary, challenging our parents or family sometimes, especially in the Asian culture, where there's that hierarchy. Like your parents are almost infallible, you know? So if you lack courage in confronting your family like this, know that it's not willpower that gives you courage, it's the right insight. So belief in the truth is what gives you courage. So if you feel scared to have these conversations, it's worth examining why. You know, what lie are you still loyal to? Because the truth is that there's always a balance of power. You are not like subject to your parents in the sense that they have more power than you. No. You can always say my favorite word, which is no, right? And you have to realize that as long as you are rooted in the truth, Jesus is literally by your side. Because Jesus is the truth, and the truth is God. And if God be for me, who can be against me? So if you're standing on the side of truth, who can be against you, right? He's like, I started imagining God right by my side when I was facing my exploding mother. And then I didn't feel so scared anymore, you know? The question is, do you truly believe it? Like, we all know what the Bible says, but do you truly believe it? And then the second thing I would do different is speak the truth in love. You know, after lots of failure, I realized this is the only real way to get through to people. It's also what the Bible teaches us to do, right? So to speak the truth without love can make us accusatory and naggy. It's too rough and unpalatable for the other person. And these conversations will only leave the other party feeling attacked. And they will be automatically defensive. And wouldn't you if you were attacked? I think we all would, right? If someone came to us and just started attacking us, you'd be like, oh, what the heck? No, you know? And then you can't communicate. But to speak lovingly without the truth is not helpful for anyone. You won't change anything because you can't even face the problem. You can't even address the problem. So how can you change anything? You will probably actually just strengthen the misbelief. And actually, we learned at Living Wisdom that one of the predominant qualities of a cult is that they value conformity and, quote, love above the truth. And so people will lie and believe in lies all for the sake of keeping the peace, right? Do you want your family to operate like a cult? Then don't use lies as the price to pay for peace. Let's use my family motto that I talked about as a real example, right? Like that rest is a waste of time. If I approached it and talked to my parents about it with only truth and no love, it would sound something like this. But Mum, you know, you really screwed me up being so critical every time I had a break. You know, what were you thinking? Now I can't even take a break without feeling guilty. You know, you're crazy. You screwed me up. All of those things are probably true, but there's no love, right? But then, if it's only love and no truth, it'd sound like, oh, Mum, I know you were quite tough on me growing up, but that's okay. You know, I'm really thankful for it because it made me tough too. I really appreciate it. That would just strengthen the family motto, right? But the truth and love will sound something like, you don't have to yell, you don't have to accuse, you don't have to butter up to them. You just say it in like a matter-of-fact way, in a calm but firm way. Oh, Mum, you know, remember how you used to always tell me to do something else whenever I was resting? Well, to be honest, I don't think it was the best thing. You know, it made it very hard for me to rest. It actually really hurt me. But I actually see the same tendencies in you. You know, I see how stressed and tired you are all the time. How you don't allow yourself to rest either. But we all need rest, right? Even God rested. Can we work on this together? So you said everything you need to say in a truthful yet loving way. And as long as you've done that and they still blow up, it's no longer your problem because they've chosen to react that way, right? And if we just can't operate worrying about how other people will react, because that's completely out of your control. And that's like everyone's responsible for their own feelings, so they're actually responsible for that blow up. And you can just really calmly ask them, why are you so upset? And that will start another conversation, right? And a very helpful tip to help you do this is to check your heart motivation. Do you just want to be right? Or do you want your loved ones to experience the same freedom you have? If you actually just want to be right, you'll automatically be accusatory and won't be too rough, and you will almost do anything you can to be right. And If you just want to be right and prove the other person wrong, it'll naturally carry out in the words you use and your tone. But if if your motivation is actually for their benefit, it changes the way you think and how you phrase your words and your tone and everything, and it actually makes it more helpful. But also look for the right support and friends. It can be a hard road, especially if your family's crazy. And I think perhaps our families are all crazy somewhere, right? But look for the right support and friends, other family and church community. You'll need the support, but it's worth it. But also, like, love your family enough to keep trying, even if they don't get it at first. Honestly, it would have been easier for me to just cut off my family and not bring anything up to them, because that literally would have been easier. It would have avoided lots of conflict and maintained the peace. But is that what you really want? Do you want to keep living under the power of those misbeliefs? And a helpful realization I had that I think is actually helpful not only in changing family models, it's helpful in any lie you face in ministry and work and anything. That realization that encouraged me was that I'm actually not responsible for changing my family. Yeah, I'm not responsible for changing my family. God is. And people only change when they are fully convinced of the truth. So keeping that in mind helped me not to tie my value and worth to the state of my family. I stopped feeling like a failure when nothing seemed to change. I stopped feeling like I was dragging a ton of bricks through the mud. Instead of nagging my parents to change, I just lived my new life with God, full of joy and peace. And when they saw the difference in me, I just pointed to them to the source of it all. I became a persuader instead of like a control freak. Do this, And at Living Wisdom, they started it off really well. And Rosemary, which is David's wife, she said, her and David are just beggars telling other beggars where the bread is. And that's kind of like the attitude that we need to have, because if we see everyone as we're on the same team, we're victims of this thing called sin, or we're patients from this illness called sin, then it's really hard to come at it from a place of superiority of like, oh, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, do this, do that, it's good for you. It's just more like, hey, you were bigger and you had bread and now you're not hungry, and then someone else is hungry, and if they ask you, where'd you get the bread? You just say, oh, over there, right? It's just a suggestion. And if they don't listen to you, there's no need to feel angry anymore, right? They just suffer the consequences of their decisions, I guess. And that's really all we can do. We can persuade and tell people where the good stuff is. If they don't want it, that's their choice. And why is that all we can do? Because of human sovereignty, right? The balance of power works both ways. People can't force us to do things. We can't force other people to do things either, right? Can't force things on people that they don't want. So truly understanding and accepting this concept will help you be a more centered person. You do not need to bend to the will and labels of others, but also you have no power to bend and label others to your will. Everyone only has as much authority as the other person loans them. So, if you see, a family motto that you think is wrong and you talk to your family about it and they don't agree, they blow up, well, move on. But the thing is, it's not that you're abandoning them, because you're always ready to help them when they want it, right? You just keep praying and give that responsibility to God. That's his part. And when they ask you or other opportunities come up, always be ready to have those conversations. But it's not about forcing them into change, right? And I've realized now that actually all the early conversations I had with my mum came from selfish motivations. It was all about me, what she did to me, how she made me feel. Even my desire for her to change was so that I could stop feeling triggered, so that she could stop doing those things to me, right? If that's your only motivation, it's only natural that you make things that you take things personally, that you take offense when none was intended and blow up at the slightest poke on your bruise. But unfortunately, that's also quite normal, because people in pain or perceived danger can only focus on themselves. But normal doesn't mean right, right? So if you have to create some boundaries and make some space between you and family, probably grieve first, then come back and sort things out. It's what I did too. You know, I told my parents, and I quote, you know, basically this is what I say word to word, like word for word. Look, I just can't live under the same roof as you guys right now. Hearing you guys talk makes me angry. I'm not complaining and not blaming you, but that's just the reality. And so I moved out. And that space that we created really helped us actually rebuild the relationship. So you're not creating space to abandon them or ditch them. You're actually creating space so that you can heal, so that you can come back together stronger, right? And I've mentioned a couple times now how powerful false family models can be throughout this talk. But the good news is, like just like any other lie, they only have as much power over you as you choose to give them. You know, if you believe the lie, it can destroy your life. If you don't believe it and believe the truth instead, it literally can do nothing to you. It's like a wisp of smoke that disappears into the wind. And nothing but a shadow in the night. Like sometimes shadows look big and scary, but they can't even touch you, right? And lies are actually the same. And when you realize that and truly accept it, then that also empowers you to actually face the family mottos, especially confronting, or like, I don't really want to use the word confronting, but like dealing with it with your family. Sometimes there's a bit of, you know, tug of war going on. But if you're, it helps you to be healthy because you have a God-centered view of yourself, like, right? Like God says you're this and you believe it. And so when your family accuses you of being this and that, you're just like, no. And you can move on, you know? And that's really when the difference starts happening. And that's true for any misbelief or false foundation, and not just family models. So you can use the things I've talked about to face any kind of like false belief, right? But it's your choice whether you do it or not, really. Yeah, that's my talk. Any questions? Thank you.